We're excited to get back going on Survive to Thrive in 2021. For those of you that I don't know, my name's Nick Miller. I'm the Executive Director at the Venture College, which is a program in the College of Innovation and Design at Boise State. And we help students launch their ventures beyond the classroom. We started this with Trailhead and TM back in March of 2020, which feels like a lifetime ago. And obviously part of our intent was to continue fostering community in Boise. Much like if you were to walk into Trailhead before the pandemic hit, you could find the people and the resources and the information that you need to get your company going, to be part of something. And so we didn't want to lose that energy. And so that's why we created Survive to Thrive, was to continue building that community. And so we're really excited today to have two companies, two founders with us that, a while back were looking at some really great successes all the way back in, October during Boise Startup Week. And that's actually where we paused. Survive to Thrive took a break for Boise Startup Week, and we've been on a bit of a hiatus since then. So we thought a really fun way to kick back off would be to bring in Alexis and Dan. Alexis, one of the founders of Chillow, and Dan, the founder of Recipe 33. Alexis won the Boise Startup Week 20K pitch competition, and Dan won Trailmix, the food company startup pitch competition, both of those during Boise Startup Week. So Dan and Alexis, thank you so much for joining us today. And I will ask you both to introduce yourselves, but maybe before I do that, I'll pause and see if TM has any thoughts to add here or if I missed something.
Thanks, Nick. I don't think you missed anything. You covered everything I had not written down, and so that's good. I'm excited to get this kicked off. For one, it's a new year, and I'm looking forward to continuing these kind of engagements when the in-person option is just not as available as it used to be. And also kicking off the Survive to Thrive series and this year with respect to Survive to Thrive with winners from Startup Week. And so as some of you may know, I'm the co-chair at Startup Week. Trailmix, the pitch competition that Dan and Recipe 33 won, is a Trailhead program. And so I'm really excited to check in with both, sort of get an understanding of the lead up to Startup Week, what that meant, not just the win, but the process itself, and get a good understanding of where both ventures are today. And so I'm excited to get into it.
All right. Alexis, do you want to kick us off and tell us a little bit about your company, what Chillow does, and maybe just a brief summary of kind of how you arrived at starting Chillow and what that journey has been like a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So my partner and husband, co-founder of Chillow, Stephen, may be popping in here after his meeting. But him and I had several pretty terrible experiences with roommates in the Bay Area where we're from, and San Francisco. And we decided back, probably 9 years ago, when this idea just formulated after a pretty big horror story of a roommate taking all of our rent portions and going to Vegas and getting us evicted. It was kind of the last straw that my husband and partner said, gosh, how is there not a way to vet people before you open up your home to them at a higher level by being able to review, rank, and endorse a past roommate? And spreading that knowledge for people to make better and more educated decisions on who they let into their home or who they choose to share a home with. And that is how the idea evolved. Now, as I said, it was about 9 years ago. And so it's taken a move to Boise to be able to fund bootstrapping our startup. Technology startups are obviously those who are no stranger to tech startups. They are very expensive. So living in the Bay Area posed its challenges. So we 3 years ago moved here and have been building and bootstrapping and are getting ready to launch Chillow in the App Store on Google, as well as the Apple Store this spring.
Awesome, thank you. And I know we'll hear more about how it works and you know, how people can access the product. So excited to learn more about that. Dan, do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey with Recipe 33 and a little bit about your background as well?
Yeah. So I have about 25 years of experience in consumer packaged good industry. And I've worked for M&M, Mars, Ghirardelli Chocolate, so a lot of confection, strong background. I met my wife about 14 years ago, and they weren't going to move their factory to Chicago where I was living. So I had the opportunity to move out to Seattle. And I joined the family business. You know, you do it the hard way. You marry the daughter, you marry the daughter of the founder. And had a great experience doing a lot of international work with them. They're a big co-packer for like Costco, Sam's Club. And so was kind of in the nut space, the chocolate space, had the opportunity to go back to school and work on my MBA at the University of Washington. So I love tying back into, you know, supporting other entrepreneurs and kind of telling them my story and how I was able to. But I honestly had zero intent to start my own business, but it is contagious. Being around my father-in-law, he is that spark plug, that person that, you know, he could get his butt kicked all day long, but ring the bell, he's back up, he's ready for the next round. And I think it takes a lot of that to be able to start a company. So during the MBA program, a lot of late night study groups, somebody would always bring snacks. You read the back of the package, it's either loaded with garbage ingredients, or I always say that, you know, you get the residue all over your hands, the dreaded Cheeto fingers. And that's where Recipe 33 was born. There were about 40 of my classmates that they would give me thumbs up, thumbs down on my concept of my recipe as I was kind of refining it and working it. We did a pitch to our graduation thesis to wrap up the program, and we ended up winning that. And it was awesome. It was a great experience. And it was probably just enough push to kind of like a couple of my classmates said, hey, you know, this seems like it has legs. How do we get this? So we classified it as continued education for the first year to kind of like validate the business model. You know, there are a lot of smart people out there. There are a lot of great concepts out there, but how do you basically, you got to, you know, is the velocity there? Is the gross margin there? Is the consumer there? And those were the big things that we were trying to push out of this infused almond concept. So that's the Recipe 33 story and how we got to there.
Great, thank you. And it sounds like from both of you, it's been as is often the case in startups, a pretty long journey, and, you know, experiences both good and bad, be it a roommate taken off to Vegas or having your fingers covered in Cheeto dust. All the problems are relative to your experience. And, you know, as TM said, you know, one of the reasons we brought you two on in particular was you won pitch competitions at Boise Startup Week. So maybe we can start there. Tell us how you ended up making the decision to apply to the pitch competition, what your preparation looked like. Obviously, you did something really well. You won. And I think we'll have a lot of folks that watch this either now or later who will be interested in hearing, what does that decision process look like to jump in both feet and get the win? So maybe Dan, we'll start off with you. If you can tell us about, well, one, you're in Seattle. How'd you hear about Boise Startup Week and what made you decide to come join us?
Sure. So my CFO is actually based in Boise. So when she wrapped up the MBA program, she had an opportunity to join a CFO role in Boise market. So I am not a CFO. I don't want to be a CFO. So I was making quite a few trips over to Boise, and she connected me with Will Fowler. And I know he's pretty tied in the market there. And she goes, hey, he's made some investments in food. She goes, come over and do your pitch with him. and just get feedback. And, we said, we're not trying to get money. We want to try and make our pitch better. So when we do get in front of the right audience, we could do that. With COVID, I was spending a lot of time trying to drive validating the business model. And when COVID hit, I couldn't go out into the stores. I couldn't work with retail partners the way I had. So, and I'd been trying to raise money just here in Seattle, trying to pitch to a lot of tech people. So people that invest in tech. And it's not that they don't know how to invest in consumer packaged goods. Most of them don't want to do the valuation. And when COVID hit, it really caused me to pivot and to really try to focus on places where people that invest in food are looking. And the trade shows were all shut down. The normal places they would go and walk trade shows for investment they're not happening. So a lot more of these type of programs. So the Boise Trail, there's one in Seattle, there was one in Oregon, and I just signed up for as many as I could participate in, and really kind of refining my pitch. But really it was fishing where the fish are, trying to get in front of the right people. And Will was kind of the big person that kind of connected me with the network there in Boise that helped me, that really it got us involved and find the opportunity there in Boise.
If I may pick up on something you said there, Dan, I received a call from a Trailmix participant from 2018, and she shared with me that the fact that she couldn't go into the newly landed customers, so she was not a winner at Trailmix and did not get on retail shelves right then. It took her about 18 months after Trailmix, with some of the momentum that she had built from the event and the relationships that she'd built specifically with Albertsons, to then get on retail shelves about 18 months later. Then COVID hit, and she cites the fact that she was not able to go and accompany her in-store demos with a new product that's local, that doesn't have a lot of traction. The brand isn't all that known. I've been to Albertsons when those product demos are being done by the founder of the actual product. And those interactions are pretty cool, right? I mean, they get my attention and they make me aware of, look, this is a local product. She couldn't do that. And in a long story short, that one opportunity caused her to close the business. So, as I'm talking to her and I'm trying to help her as a food product entrepreneur, it's really easy for me to say, what about a multi-channel approach? Now, what about an omni-channel approach? Why aren't you selling online? Could have seen this coming, diversify your revenue streams. But that's TMED at Trailhead, who's never launched a food product in his life. What's your take on that, Dan? And tell me, maybe tell us if there was anything you did not knowing that prepared you to pivot during COVID.
So we were already on our own website and on Amazon as well. But we'd already invested with an agency to kind of help us kind of refine, because definitely Amazon, there's a way, anybody can do Amazon. There's the way to do it that really makes it go. And these agencies really kind of have that. You can dabble. I mean, we dabbled for a year and a half and we were doing a little bit of business. The second we engaged an agency, we made that investment about 4 months before COVID hit. Sheer luck. But for us, it was more of like, okay, what is that channel of business? What does that cost to operate in? How do we acquire customers? Just to understand that cost structure of that business. So when we have investment, we can say, okay, here's what it takes to do brick and mortar. Here's what it takes to do e-commerce, the other channels that we were focusing on. But we've kind of dabbled, heavy in retail, but really slightly some focus on the e-commerce. So I would tell you to understand the cost structure everywhere. Luck or timing, we had already had our foot in there, and it paid. I mean, the money we invested with an agency, it's paid itself multiple times over just since COVID. And retail has gone, I mean, it's soft for me. Another channel that's picked up for us is gift baskets, like gift boxes, baskets, especially during the holiday this year. People wanted to send, if you're from Boise and your family lives away and they grew up there, you want to send stuff. I mean, we had that experience here in Seattle, and that people, I know I sent multiple boxes back to all my family and friends that have visited, to Seattle, I sent them a little bit of Seattle. So that business has helped offset some of the softness I've had in traditional retail. But for me, it was kind of understanding those cost structures and what those other channels look like, just so like when I had an investor come in or the right amount of money come in, that we could really start to put the gas on those channels. So I think a lot of it is timing. The big thing that I got out of the stores, it helped me understand who my customer was. And I've taken a lot of that communication that I would do one-on-one with the customer, because it's not scalable, at least for the founder to be able to, I'm going to do 10,000 demos this year. I did 500 in 2 years and it about broke me. So physically, but just to be able to take that and how do you put that into Instagram content? How do you put that into Facebook content? Because what you're doing in that 30-second, 2-minute interaction, you can scale that and replicate that. And that's where I think a lot of food companies that have done really well have been able to create that content to be able to leverage those social media platforms to grow their business.
That's really interesting. So you translated the brick and mortar approach to a digital channel. And I'm curious, and I tell you where my curiosity comes from, as I talk to early stage food product entrepreneurs, they shy away from Amazon, probably because they tend to dabble and not make the investment with an agency. And they get overwhelmed. They're one of many on Amazon and they don't see an ROI. Do you see traction, not just on Amazon, but digital traction translate back into in-store or physical traction, or do you think they're completely separate?
I do think they bounce. It's probably not as much. I mean, if you're young, like my parents call me to order stuff for them on Amazon. So, but I do think that if it's 2 days, but you can get it in market, and I'm having a party tonight, I'm having 3 people over for wine and cheese tonight, and I want this on my cheese board. I want black truffle infused almonds on my cheese board. They'll look, because it's funny, because I've had this debate with my website, the people that provide my website, about why do you still, and I look at all these brands that have where to find their product. And people still look for it. I think the convenience is always there to go to Amazon or to go to their website and to have it in a couple of days. But there are situations where, like, I'm doing this party tonight, I didn't plan it out, I want this product, where can I find it? And if it's in our market, they will go and do that. So I do think that there is back and forth, but if you shop online and it's convenient and for a safety reason, it's easy. It's really easy, and our business is up. For me, I know brick and mortar. That's the channel I feel most comfortable in. The part that scares me, the cost structure of the online business or the e-commerce business. But I also see, like, I'm touching a lot of customers that, I'm probably, if I did brick and mortar traditional process, I'd be 3 and 4 years out from ever getting to those markets where I'm able to tap into some of my high potential, high volume customers years in advance. So I think you have to have a balance in them. I do think there is bleed back and forth.
So Dan, one thing you mentioned when talking about your decision to pitch at Trailmix was just how you would put your name out there quite a bit, especially in response to the pandemic. When like you said, typically you'd be in a store, brick and mortar, shaking hands and chatting with your customers, as well as potential investors or partners in the business. So, knowing that you're very much a physical product, and our team at Chillow is very much a SaaS, software as a service, digital product. What was, Alexis, what was your team's experience like as you thought about what the upside would be to go pitch at Boise Startup Week? What were the benefits that you were hoping, other than, of course, the $20K cash that you walked away with? What were you hoping would be some of the ancillary benefits for your company?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we probably would have 2 separate answers to this, so I'll let him answer as well. It was definitely around the connections and the networking, most certainly. We were involved in Boise Startup Week the year before. And I remember getting out of it and saying, Washi totally deserved to win first place and Free to Feed, in a close second. They're both great companies. And I said, I learned from that what we weren't prepared for at that point. And what I learned from that was, and I said, manifestation being big in our household, like we're going to come back and we're going to win next year. And I learned exactly how much farther along we needed to be in order. It was a stepping stone for us. It was like, okay, let's hit this goal next. Next year, let's plan to get ahead by this much, measurable. Obviously, if your goals aren't measurable, it's difficult to attain. So we measured it out and we said, this is where we want to be, and we're going to win. And that first year was, and that's what I would encourage all entrepreneurs is you're never going to be ready to do anything, right? Start a company, involve yourself in something like this and present. But what was really nice was we learned so much from the first year that when it came time for the second year, we felt extremely prepared. And with that being said, our hopes and goals was, yes, to win first place. The $20,000 has gone a long way, especially when we're talking about, SaaS, as you said, software as a service. There's a lot that goes into that. And when I say a lot, it's time and money. But with that being said, the connections that we've been able to make, we're in a position now where we're looking to hire an additional developer and we want to keep them local. And if any developers are on the call right now, feel free to contact us. But if not, there always is somebody who is in the community who's right there, and the networking with not only just investors, but within the ability to build our team and grow our network has been absolutely huge. And the feedback alone from investors that we've been able to connect with after this, Alturas, Kevin Learned, specific investors in the area, outside of the area, have been tremendous based off of their feedback. And they're always challenging us to think outside the box and grow and pushing us to think, okay, well, this is how you think, this is how I think, let's go out and figure out how everyone thinks. And though we did a ton of market research like Dan did in the beginning, we interviewed well over 500 individuals in our target market. And we found that, wow, not only was everybody really, really excited about this platform opportunity, one doesn't exist like it. And our novelty being reviews. And I know we'll get into exactly what Chillow is and what we do and what we solve. But what we did with our market research solidified, okay, here we have a thesis, a hypothesis, let's go out and now build. And here we are now getting the feedback. It's all different processes in our journey, which is now we're at the point where we're getting ready to launch. So we're building, our marketing team is building a go-to-market strategy. And now we're also having conversations with investors to take it that next step further. So it's all been a process. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I got a second, and I definitely second that statement in all regards. The one thing that definitely resonates with me in terms of the amazing opportunity within Boise Startup Week was something similar to what Simon Sinek has described. He's well known for his TED Talk speech about pursuing something that allows you to achieve your big why. When this inspirational idea came upon us back in 2010, it was based on hardship, and we realized that there was a service that could be provided to the greater good of people that allows someone out there, no matter if it's one or hundreds of thousands of people, to avoid a similar situation that we went through. So at the end of the day, I mean, one thing that I would say is the guiding light or the burning fire that keeps it going is understanding what your big why is and what it'll allow you to what you will achieve along the way while you achieve what's at hand. So our big why, I suppose, in essence, is to help other people who have a shared living environment avoid disastrous situations that they could have avoided before ever entering in that situation. And again, I mean, the steps along the way, Boise Startup Week, I consider to be one of the moments in life that will never, ever, ever escape me, and will, forever and always be treasured and greatly appreciated. We, as Alexis said, we learned a lot along the way, and we are forever grateful.
I'm blushing over here, all these compliments to Startup Week. Steve, it's great to see you, by the way. Nice haircut.
Likewise.
On that note, I do want to pick up on something, and I think both Recipe 33 and Chillow are uniquely qualified to speak to this. Alexis, earlier you mentioned sort of the decision process to leave the Bay Area and come to Boise. You mentioned cost as one thing. Now, I'd like to open up the floor for, and let's start with Dan and then get back to you guys. Dan earlier also mentioned that he was pitching to tech investors in Seattle in his area, and that there wasn't a fit there. And so let's talk about gaps in Boise for a moment. And Dan, your perspective, I mean, you operate out of Seattle. So maybe give us a glimpse of, some of the parts of it, call it the ecosystem, the infrastructure that helps early stage entrepreneurs like you in Seattle. What does Seattle do well in your opinion? And where are places where that ecosystem can improve, specifically from Recipe 33's point of view?
I mean, as far as food companies go, I mean, there are it's not Austin or Boise, or I'm sorry, Austin or Boulder. I mean, those are like, if you're a food startup, those are like the two big hubs. There's money there, there's funding there, there's mentorship. I mean, there's a lot of the pieces that you would need. Seattle doesn't really have that. We've got, I participated in Business Impact Northwest, and it's not just food, but it supports small businesses like what Trailmix does, and Oregon, they have their Oregon Entrepreneurial Network. I mean, I just started fishing and looking for every program that would take. And I don't know that without COVID, they may not have let us dial in and do remote and pitch and participate. So I just really started focusing on that. I won't say Seattle is a perfect market. If you're really not a biotech or a tech company, it's harder to raise capital here. You really have to be dialed in. And I had people willing to write the check. They didn't want to do the due diligence and the valuation piece. So it wasn't that I couldn't find the money here. I couldn't find somebody to close the round here.
Yeah, if you look at ecosystems and their assets, and I want to pose this question, the same question to Chillow. When I think of Seattle, it's Microsoft, it's Boeing, it's Adobe,
Amazon. Yeah.
And that ecosystem will foster, like-minded, and then of course later Amazon. But that it will foster verticals that are sort of, I don't want to say like-minded, but that are similar enough to where there is some synergy from either the investor's point of view or the entrepreneur point of view. And so that said, I'd like to get Alexis and Steve to chime in on this, especially as it sounded like you made somewhat of a conscious decision to leave the Bay and come to Boise and build here. So, on the surface, that's a huge compliment to our ecosystem. And I'd like you to speak to that, but also tell me about, and the audience, maybe about some gaps in our ecosystem, specifically from your point of view, some pain points. And this is, don't view this as a criticism. It's really constructive criticism to help us improve. So I'd like to hear that from you.
Yeah, we both can touch on this. As a woman CEO in tech, I always am up against obstacles, no matter where I'm going to be. And so I went into this with a little bit of a healthy ego, thinking it doesn't matter where we are, we're going to make it work. And Boise happened to be obviously plastered all over for best place, to grow and prosper. And so that came into factor as well, of course, lifestyle. But when it came to the business side, we are very familiar with the ability to find more investment in Washington, Austin, California, Silicon Valley, et cetera, which, by the way, it goes without saying, Dan, I will definitely shoot you an email after this, because we should definitely train investors information, because I'm in an area that is a little bit more focused on agricultural food, things of that nature. And it sounds like obviously you're more in the tech space. So we can definitely connect after this. With that being said, what I have found is it's as challenging as your mindset will allow it to be. And, we, without the ability to bootstrap a company to find investors to invest in, you have nothing. So for us, it was a conscious decision that it was taking a risk to move out of Silicon Valley, where we were, essentially born and raised, and take a risk to build something. But what we knew was, if we weren't able to afford to bootstrap to build anything, investors weren't even, it was putting the cart before the horse. Investors were irrelevant. So with that being said, we have faced challenges. Absolutely. There is a very small pool. And for the money that most tech startups do look to raise in their Series A, I've been told by dozens of investors that great idea, come to me with revenue, because they're a little bit more, they're not as quick to invest or throw around money here, from my point of view, as they are in Silicon Valley. And a lot of have said, if you don't have trailing revenue, I suggest you go there, get a big check, build your, your revenue and come back here. That's been my experience. So initial investment here has been more challenging pre-launch. Whereas in a Silicon Valley or in a larger area like Seattle, pre-launch investments are going to be easier, especially when you're in tech. So I think it's great for a lot of reasons, because here I'm getting one-on-one mentorship. It's a tight-knit community where, an investor will just hand you their information, where there it's like you've got to jump through a lot more hoops, right? But that's been some of the challenges, I would say. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, on the note of like, again, definitely want to give the highest credit to the greater Boise area and the state of Idaho for the opportunity that's at hand. With that, as like with the pretense to that is, again, growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area and loving the demographic and the community that was there, I recognize a very vast difference that shifted within the growth of the Silicon Valley. And I kept finding myself time and time again reflecting on one simple question: why are all of these gigantic, major, influential companies who are changing the world all in one place? Why can't they be in Minnesota, Miami, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco? It just didn't make sense to me, especially within tech. You can operate tech from anywhere. It just never really occurred to me, like, never had that aha, like, that's why they're all in the Silicon Valley. So when that all happened, and again, we look to grow both personally and professionally, I didn't see any sort of concrete anchor that would force us to stay within in that area. I'm sure that the conversation could be held based on investments, which is what we're talking about. But in terms of growth and stimulating economies elsewhere, certainly we are proud and we are excited and anxious to do so within the Boise community.
Yeah, one thing really quickly that I'd like to add is with our product, it's harder to relate to. I think, Dan, you've got an incredible product, and it's, I think, easier for any demographic or age group to relate to. Typically, the majority of investors that we're talking to, whether they're in Boise or Silicon Valley, which we are speaking with both, have looked at us straight up and said, is this really an issue? Like, I haven't had a roommate in the last 30 years, right? And when I found a roommate, it was somebody I was paired up with in college, and I lived with them for 2 years, and I got married thereafter. Every single one we're talking to, minus the ones that are interested in enough to go home and say, hey, college kids at home, what are your thoughts about this? And those are the ones that have now come back around and said, hey, we went home and talked to our kids. Like, this is a huge issue. And we're like, I know. And then also here in Boise too, we have a much smaller rental market. Granted, we are growing rapidly and the prices have increased. So we're seeing people living together longer and longer. However, when you live in San Francisco, you're bound to have 5 to 6 roommates in a 3-bedroom house. And that's just the norm. And because it's a $4,000 to $5,000 3-bedroom apartment, maybe at that cost, you're looking at maybe even higher than $6,000. So relatability is all a factor in that as well.
Relatability is huge. I think, let me pull on a string here. You brought up some topics around product market fit, investors looking at your product and having a hard time relating because they don't need roommates or haven't been a roommate in a long time. I imagine that those same investors are potentially landlords. And I know Chillow Pay played quite the pivotal role in your overall product market fit. So tell me a little bit about how what led up to Chillow Pay, and has that opened doors with those same investors who may be landlords?
They have open conversations. Again, getting money pre-launch is extremely difficult for anybody on the call. It's not doable. It absolutely is. But integrating Chillow Pay was an idea that actually Stephen had come up with when we were at a standstill with how are we going to monetize this quick enough to get taken seriously by investors. And, our whole goal is similar in the sense of Facebook or Instagram, where we have a ton of data, right? So companies, because our exit strategy is an acquisition by a much larger company, and with our eyes set on a company like a Zillow or a Redfin, et cetera. Because when you have that kind of rental history and data of users, it's better than gold, right? That's your monetization exit strategy. However, it cut our opportunity to speak with investors short when you tell them that. And what we've realized was exactly what TM said, right? And this is where diversification and also pivoting comes into factor. As a CEO, you have to make those decisions based on the betterment overall of the company right now and in the future. And looking into the future, we've realized that giving a payment portal, which is, so just for those of you interested on the call, Chillow Pay is a peer-to-peer Venmo-like payment portal within Chillow. And it allows individuals who are either living together to, pay each other back and forth instantly for utilities, or for the individual to pay the landlord or the other roommate who probably is the one collecting rent, as you have a lot of sublet opportunities going on, especially in inter areas like a San Francisco, immediately through their platform. And again, like a Venmo-like fashion, and it's called Chillow Pay, and we're able to monetize that on a monthly basis. And how we do that is actually $10 a month, and that's our business model going forth. With what TM brought up, yeah, Chillow Pay has reopened the doors to those conversations. But again, that pre-launch always is challenging. And Stephen came up with that again, with being faced with being told, we need to see some ability to monetize. Whether you choose to utilize that or not, we need to be able to see how you can. And obviously with the landlords, that's a huge factor. And more importantly for us in our platform, it's those that are subletting rooms within their home. Yeah.
Yeah, to that extent, I mean, I kind of had the aha moment. The example, if you were to reference what she just described in terms of like what we grew up with, when you need a computer, you might buy a computer, or nowadays a phone once every 2 years or once every year, whatever it is. And that's kind of like the Dell model or the Apple model, where again, last year a good long time. When you need it, you need it. And we didn't want that to be the same application or the same existence when it comes to the roommate scenario. But the reality is, once you get the lease, you lock down that roommate. Some people keep roommates for years. We wanted to make sure that we keep the consistency coming back. So my idea was not just to benefit the roommate to roommate so that they could all coincide their payments. So if you get notified, hey, Jake paid, Frankie paid, and Luke, they've all paid. It's only they're waiting on you to pay the landlord. That sort of communication and notifications will be provided. But where I also found it to be highly beneficial from the landlord's point of view is that if you have a room or if you have a house and you have a traction of history to look into regarding that particular tenant that you're considering to live there, not only do you have the ability to recognize, hey, this person's been ID checked, verified, this person's had a background check, credit history, and all of the landlords that they've ever had prior, let's just say they're entering into the 30s, and they've had a rental history with the landlords in which they've made agreements with, to verify and acknowledge that, hey, this month I received the payment on the 4th. This month was the 1st, the 2nd, the 4th, so on and so forth. That recognition, that history is all banked into one database that is applicable for both the landlords to reference and of course, roommate to reference. So if you're a landlord, or if you're an apartment complex and you have to check 4 or 5 different platforms, this one for background checks and this one for ID verification and this one for credit history, so on and so forth. The ability to have it all located in one area was probably the biggest value add for the landlord sector. And yes, having people come back on a monthly basis was huge for the monetization along the way.
I really appreciate how the two of you are describing a gap in the Treasure Valley. I'm going to say, and that gap is, a shortage of investment into ideas, right? I mean, and I've experienced that too with investors here. They're a bit more risk adverse.
Yeah.
To your point, they like to see some kind of revenue. They're more of the mindset of, once you have a fire, I'll give you fuel to pour on top of it. But until you have a fire, go back and go back to Boy Scouts and learn how to make one in the wild, I guess.
Yeah.
So on that fundraising note, Dan, as a food company, fundraising, I imagine, looks probably a little different than if you're a tech company. Also, you have a product, you're not at idea stage. So can you give us a glimpse into your efforts? Are you fundraising? Have you been successful around it? Tell us a little bit about Recipe 33's experience.
So since the event, I was able to close my funding round in December. So huge. I mean, honestly, I gave myself 2 years to validate, kind of go out there. And so I hit 2 years basically last April. And I just felt like I had a bunch of things going. COVID hit. And and I just like, I had to focus, I had to lock in. So I go, I'm going to do one more year. And that's when I really did this hard pivot, started participating in all these programs. So it was the program I didn't advance to the finals on. So it was the Oregon program that I participated in. And it's finding the right people at the right time. And it's a strategic fit there. They infused capital, line of credit, and then access to 4 or 5 employees that allow me to keep people off my books and leverage in their stable of investments. So it's a strategic investment fit for me. It was getting in there and keep swinging. You know what I mean? Get in front of as many people as you can. But I was very naive. The first year and a half, I really thought I can run Seattle. I'll hit Portland as I'm down there. And I'm, those tech guys, I'll get them over to my side. They'll see it. They're going to see the value. And I did. I had people that they just didn't want to do the valuation. And I couldn't get past that in my head. And then that's where that hard pivot came to really going to the people that were going to do that. And I had the opportunity to bring them along, but this fit, it was truly strategic. And it's the one that I didn't go the furthest in. So it's the one, it was the right opportunity. They line up. They're already sourcing almonds and some different things. I mean, they totally got my business. They'd not seen anything like it. They'd been in the industry for years. So it was just like all the stars kind of aligned. And, had I started on this earlier, this fund is only 1.5 years old. So it was one that, I could have went out there and tried it earlier. I may not have timed it out right. So I really do think that it's trying to get as front of as many people as you can, all the different platforms. And at least in the food space, there's tons. I mean, I can give you a list. I've got a few people that I'm kind of coaching, and I've had a ton of people share with me over my entire career, but just on the entrepreneurial journey over the last 2.5 years. So, I've got my laundry list of my podcasts that I follow that are CPG specific, and events and programs that aren't the traditional trade shows that have all shut down, but the programs like Trailhead, Trailmix, it's a great opportunity to get in front of. And the biggest thing, the $20,000 was awesome. It's the opportunity with Albertsons. That's the part. I mean, we were talking about the revenue piece. For me, it's the velocity, showing that you can operate. I've really been focused on like Whole Foods, kind of the natural specialty store. So to get the opportunity to Albertsons that, they're high-end stores, but then they're mainstream stores. That's where I need to validate my model to show that, we're not just some specialty natural item that's only for this level of consumer. We can play on a much bigger level with our concept. That's the big thing that we're looking for.
Huge
So
congrats.
to that end, I think one of the things that I think is interesting about pitch competitions is you end up on stage, right? You're on stage, the spotlight's on you, so a lot of people see your face. But what I'm hearing from both of you is that these pitch competitions gave you the opportunity to build real authentic relationships with companies, with peers, with capital partners. And Dan, it almost sounds like, especially in pandemic times, you were just hammering that and going from competition to competition. And I mean, am I hearing that correct, that you actually did build some valuable relationships? Or do you find that when you're in a pitch competition, it's more surface relationships and it doesn't have all the value that you might anticipate? Kind of give us your perspective on that, both of you, please.
Me, Dan? Okay. It's funny because I've already contacted, Jenny from Wild Heart, the sipping vinegar. I went down and met with her. We've been exchanging contacts and some different information. I really do try to, when I participate in these programs, be 100% in, network with throughout. You just never know who that person was, who that investor or who that contact or that one person that can unlock that place that you're just trying to get to, whether it's a new opportunity, a distribution opportunity, an investment opportunity. And when I do these, I really try to block out the time. I really try to invest and focus. The events that I haven't done as well in, I probably have learned more because of the tough questions, or I didn't think something through, or I will say this was definitely an MBA project. And it was funny, I did a brand teardown. They call it a brand slam. And they really went through it. I mean, a lot of the stuff I knew were my challenges as far as the marketing aspect. And it's hard. It's absolutely humbling because it's your baby. I mean, I put so much into that, but every one of those events, you grow, you stretch. You have to be able to kind of compartmentalize and be able to step back and see the bigger opportunity and humble enough to swallow it and be able to like, okay, how do I make my pitch? How do I make my product? How do I make my message stronger? And those are the big pieces. But every one of the events I've been in, and it was funny as we were wrapping up, as we were finalizing and doing all the live event or the video events with Trailmix, I was in the process of doing my due diligence with my investor. And so like, it couldn't have been perfect timing that, we've been negotiating kind of like, what does the framework look like on the investment and the deal? Then it's the whole next level of when the investors come in. So it's just kind of those, almost like a security, like a check. It's like, okay, it's not just, I know they've done their homework on me, research on the product, the fit. They interviewed a couple of my key buyers, but it was kind of participating in this event and then winning it was just like those validators that you need. And it was perfect timing. So those are the big pieces. What you get out of the program. I think a lot of it is what you put into the programs.
Yeah, Alexis and Chillow team, I know you all have been to a handful of these as well, and I'd be curious to hear your experience about the relationships that have come out of them and how they've benefited you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we both are very opposite. I'm a high driver, so I look at things in terms of like, I'm here to win, and he brings me back down to also because he's very relational, which actually works really well in our team, that he's like, we're here to build relationships. And so what's nice is we won and we built a lot of relationships because we're both there to remind each other that we're there to do both. So it's a really nice balance. We built a ton of relationships within the network here in Boise and even outside, especially being a part of Investors Choice as well, which is what Boise Startup Weekend and Trailhead introduced us to last year, which we'll be attending as well this year, outside of our realm, which is important for us, especially being within a smaller technology startup community. So the relationships have been more instrumental than any of the investments or winnings, and exactly what Dan said. And it takes patience. I think as an entrepreneur, we get really excited and we're really passionate and we're typically drivers. And so it's sometimes nice to sit back and think, you have no idea who you just talked to or what kind of relationship you're going to be able to provide, not only to our team, but to each other. Right. And there's so many opportunities for networking that have been instrumental in the growth of our business. And more importantly, have made us think at a much, much higher level. We're not as fortunate as Dan. We're still looking for that right investor, which Dan, congratulations. It goes without saying, that's huge to lock that in. We're still at that point, but what we learned and from the relationships that we created, whether it's with Heather Messinger, who was one of our mentors last year, or and she's really helping us around now the financial side of things, or whether it was Kevin Lernan, who also challenged us to think at a higher level than what we were actually thinking, and picking apart, which is so hard for an investor, picking apart the product, the solution you're building, and then also on the other side, forcing you to be prepared to have those hard conversations with those investors, because the more investors we've talked to, we've realized, or I've at least realized, oh my gosh, if I had to do this 6 months ago, I would have been laughed out of the room. I would have not been able to defend what I'm asking for, you know, justify, explain in terminology that was, quite frankly, 6 months ago, way above my head. So the relationships that we've built have put us in a trajectory, an upward trajectory of getting that much closer, right? Because it's not an A to Z. It doesn't look, you know, success isn't a straight line, right? It looks like this. And right now we're on that roller coaster of entrepreneurship. And each time we pivot, it's a relationship that actually helps us move forward. So I think that's probably,
You said it perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Chillow, if you could share with us, I know you're building product. You mentioned that you're looking to hire a developer. I see another employee of yours is on the call here. I, for one, didn't know you had any employees, so congratulations on the seemingly what appears to be growth.
thanks.
What's ahead for you all? It sounds like you're going to go back to the, well, not to the drawing board, but you're aiming to go back to investors with the fire, with some revenue. Is that correct? Is that what you're doing?
It is. We've reevaluated our Series A ask thanks to the guidance of Alturas. And we've definitely kind of reestablished some certain things pre-launch versus post-launch and what we're going to be asking for. So I don't have a number currently. And yes, one of our amazing people are on the call, our head of marketing, Madeline, which has been fantastic. And we're always obviously happy to have her on board. She's been great. All the social media you see, thanks to her. But yes, we are growing, and I'm not one to grow rapidly, so we're growing with a conscious effort. Right now, we're in a position where we're looking to bring on an additional developer to aid our CTO and getting this thing out and getting it out with as many minor bugs as possible. You know, quality always at top of mind and priority. Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of where we're at. We are absolutely growing, and we're looking for that, right? And what we've realized too, with having a CTO who's currently outside of the state, which you think it's not as important because of the Zoom and everything like that. We've realized it is important to have somebody who is also boots on the ground here. And again, it goes back to our conscious decision to try to create jobs in this area. Our goal is to grow, maintain, and keep Chillow in Boise for the foreseeable future and continue to grow one of the larger businesses here is one of our end goals, and employ and give back to the community in ways that provide jobs, especially in the tech sphere. So we're looking for that person here. And we're moving forward and continuing to grow in that regard, and also reevaluating our ask. But our goal right now, all hands on deck, is getting the product with as little bugs as possible on the App Store in spring of this year, and putting together the marketing that's going to be able to help us do that, the go-to-market strategy. That's all hands on deck. We're all working on right now. That is the goal.
I applaud the resiliency, and I also applaud the fact that both of you are willing to sit down with investors, truly listen and learn, and not just be offended or take it the wrong way and then decide to do something else with that feedback. And, you know, back to the gap of the early stage investments, really the intent behind Boise Startup Week's 20K pitch competition, as well as Trailmix. The intent is the same, slightly different in context, because we look at the 20K pitch competition as, look, those $20,000 to $50,000 checks are not being written en masse in Boise for ideas. So we identified that as a gap, we wanted to plug it. And the same goes for the food product. Trailmix, the pitch competition for food product entrepreneurs, we saw a tremendous gap and therefore opportunity to connect, you know, innovative product that are being sold at farmers markets, is what we call it. Mm-hmm. and finding a way to bridge that gap to retail shelves, right? And so again, those early investments, $20,000, $50,000 checks are hard to find if you're selling at a farmer's market and you don't have, you know, something very, very unique or special about your food product. And so really the intent for Boise Startup Week is to fill that gap. And it's very gratifying to hear, you know, from Recipe 33 that there was an investment in December around that they were able to raise. It's really gratifying to hear that it's helped Chillow to grow, to bring on people, and to go after that fire, so you can go back to investors and ask for some fuel.
Exactly.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. And again, our hats off, and we really appreciate everything you've done and everything the crew that you support along the way. We forever grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
I think just to be maybe future programming, we should get some of these investors that do write the $20,000, $50,000 checks on here, because I think I don't want to have the group walk away with the impression that there are zero checks being written out there of that size, or that there aren't angel investors, because Alexis, you mentioned Kevin Learned and others in this community that for a long time have been doing some of that work. So I want to make sure that for those folks in the community that have planted their flag in that direction, I think we have one of our next episodes over the next couple of months where we bring those folks on here. And I think it would be a fascinating conversation to talk about the difference in ecosystems, right? Of funding an idea versus, hey, I need to see 2 million in revenue before I write that big check, and why that mindset exists in other places versus here. And Dan, I think your experience as a food entrepreneur in Seattle, and what is arguably the top 2 tech ecosystems in the world, that's really fascinating that people just don't understand or don't take the time to say, I don't want to understand this almond company. Show me a digital marketplace and I get it. But the valuation of an almond manufacturing company is just way too challenging. So we all to say, I think everyone has their own cross to bear, so to speak.
Exactly. No, because if you ask me to invest in a tech company, I could look at case studies. I could go through and look at best practices. I can do that, but it's that comfort level, and that's really what I was running into. They were comfortable writing a check. If it was somebody like the founders of Sahali, if one of them was going to write me a check, do the valuation, these guys would have been all over it.
Right.
Because one, they had credibility, they've done it, they knew the right questions to ask me and to challenge me with. That's kind of what they were looking for. And I don't fault them. I know for me, if it's a food company, I know exactly what to ask you. I know where to look at in the numbers. I know what's going to drive it. I know how to break down the business and evaluate it. It's no different than if you try to have me do the same thing with a tech company. I could do I could do the ratios, I could do all the analysis, but there's not that same comfort level. So I get it and I appreciate it. I was naive in thinking that I'm gonna win them over. I'm gonna build the right thing. I'm gonna say the right stuff, and I'm gonna win you. So, and at some point, you just kind of have to accept, like, I may get. I could have gotten, but I think what I did was more strategic and a better fit for the long term and for the direction of Recipe 33, and to push me, to challenge me, and to make it better. So,
well, and I think that mindset of feeling like, well, no one else has been able to do this, but I can do it. That's ultimately what leads to all of you being in the winner's chair at competitions like this, because I think that's the mindset that it takes of, even though it hasn't been done before, I can do it. My team can do it. We're the ones that are gonna, take that hill, and all these people that passed before us, that doesn't make a difference. And it's that kind of courage and ambition that it takes. And I know that we're running out of time, and we want to be respectful of your time. And, first of all, just want to thank you for sharing your experience. Really appreciate hearing from 2 winners from Boise Startup Week. And hopefully, the folks that have been listening to this can take away some tips and tricks of their own, and get an idea of what it's like to not only compete but to win. And there will be a lot more of these opportunities. I for one, just one quick takeaway, I'm amazed at the amount of relationships you built, especially given that this was virtual. I think it's much easier when you're in person, but that really stood out to me. I don't know, TM, if there's anything that jumped out to you from today's conversation, but that was something that really stuck with me.
Yeah, like, one thing that jumped out along the same lines, we didn't talk about how the pandemic crippled the businesses. We talked about how the pandemic created other opportunities for both businesses and the positioning of the founders to go after that. That was my main takeaway. You know, from Trailhead's point of view, when the pandemic hit, we very much had to tuck our tail and ride the wave. We have a product, we have a service. Yes, we pivoted to remote and a digital format, and both Chillow and Recipe 33 got to experience that. But even we weren't as light on our feet and to respond to the pandemic. So that's been my major takeaway. Goes back to what Dan said about his father-in-law. You know, you can get beat up really bad the day before, but when the bell rings, you know, you're up there, you're ready to go again. And that's my main takeaway. And it quite frankly does inspire me a little bit to maybe roll up my sleeves a little more at Trailhead and learn a thing or two from these amazing founders we talked to.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody. It goes without saying, we appreciate all of your time as well.
Yeah, and just to touch base on that note, TM, if you ever need anything that we can help you with, or, you know, please, please, please never, ever hesitate to reach out and ask. We'd be happy to help.
I promise I won't hesitate. Thanks, everyone.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Take care.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.